Kubernetes Security learning series point of view, 18th topic is whitelist allowed registries. So I'm in a training.linuxfoundation.org. Here when you scroll down, supply chain security, which is secure your supply chain, whitelist allowed registries, comma, sign and validate images. So whitelist allowed registries. So let's try to understand. So basically, in order to whitelist the image registries, basically in the Kubernetes, we have everything is a pod. So pod is nothing but containers. Container will have images, right? So in order to achieve a security, right, you may need to whitelist a specific registry. Say my organization wanted to allow from gcr.io and docker.io, or I wanted to allow only from Docker, not from anybody else, or I wanted to allow from both but not from anything else. So likewise, there are many like ECR, Elastic Container Registry, or Azure Container Registry. So likewise, many registries. So maybe you can whitelist the whatever you needed. Maybe it's a private registry. So ultimately, you will be achieving a security, right? So in order to whitelist in the Kubernetes cluster, so there are various ways. First of all is Docker configuration level. You can whitelist or blocklist what are the registries you can download the Docker images if your machine is installed. Let's say my machine is not using a Docker, we are using a containerd in the latest 1.23. So yes, in the containerd configuration level also you can achieve the same thing, whitelist and blocklist. Another better approach is ImagePolicyWebhook. This is basically, it's a Kubernetes feature to whitelist a specific registries. So if you are whitelisting means whatever you whitelist that will be allowed. Another approach is by using OPA Gatekeeper, which is nothing but Open Policy Agent Gatekeeper. What this will do is this will basically enforce the whatever you specify. So these are the various approaches, and there are other approaches as well where you can achieve the whitelisting concept apart from these four there by using admission controller. So I have created a video on OPA Gatekeeper and admission controller. If anybody have not seen, please go and watch. I will specify in the description. Now next, first is a Docker configuration level. Say if my machine is installed with a Docker, then how do I do? So in your machine, go to the etc sysconfig and Docker. There will be a file called Docker file. There you need to specify if you wanted to block all the registries, this is a command. Then if you wanted to whitelist, say gcr.io and docker.io, so in this way add underscore registry, this command you need to specify. What is the example here? Add underscore registry hyphen add hyphen registry equal to registry.access.redhat.com. Here Red Hat registry is getting whitelisted and other one is a docker.io. So whatever the image from these two will be whitelisted. So this is the simplest way for the Docker. Now next moves to the containerd. Say let's my machine is installed with the containerd. In the containerd level there is a configuration called config.toml under etc containerd config.toml. In that what you need to do, plugins.cri.registry.mirrors, under that plugins.cri.registry.mirrors add a docker.io. I want to allow, and I wanted to allow this registry, and I wanted to allow this registry, I wanted to allow star from something else. So you can specify the private registries or public registries and whatever your favorite, right? So I'm in the 2-node Kubernetes cluster. Now I will go to the master node, Vagrant SSH master. So I am going inside my master node, right? Now I am inside already. Now sudo su. So cat etc containerd config.toml file, right? So this is the basically the config.toml file where you go and whitelist the image registries in the containerd configuration level. But every time if you wanted to modify and remove, then you need to go inside and remove. that will be, and you need to restart the container D and all, daemon reload and all you need to do. So this is the one other pain point. Now next is image policy webhook. Image policy webhook is basically, before going that, we need to understand the admission controller, how the admission controller will work in Kubernetes. Let's say you have a one deployment YAML file and you have a kubeconfig. Of course, in order to connect to any Kubernetes cluster, you need to have a kubeconfig. Then what you will do is, whenever you apply this kubectl apply if some deployment YAML file, then it will pass through the authentication mechanism by using of any of this one. Then second is authorization, either RBAC, ABAC, node or webhook. Then after that, admission controller will comes into the picture. So basically here, first authentication phase, authorization phase, then admission controller phase will comes into the picture before storing into the etcd. And here there are built-in admission controller, and then mutating and validating if you wanted to modify this particular deployment. So it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 process step. This third process step where the image policy webhook will come into the picture, right? So you need to define image policy webhook here to whitelist or block what to be allowed in this particular deployment YAML file. You will be configuring here as a one-time configuration. That's how we are going to see. This is the basic of how the admission controller is work. Next, when we say 30 built-in admission controller, so what are these? So these are the all built-in admission controller list. If you look at the other which is mentioned in the red color, image policy webhook, mutating admission webhook, validating admission webhook. So these are the specified in the red color is dynamic admission controllers, whereas rest of the things are built-in admission controllers by Kubernetes system. Basically here, image policy webhook, basically this admission controller will use a one webhook. Webhook is nothing but it's an external webhook that will be used. And here go to Kubernetes documentation and then admission controllers, right? Then when you click on first link, these are the all admission controllers, right? Here one is the image policy webhook. This is one of the admission controller. So right now, image policy webhook, basically image policy webhook, what it will do is it will solve the same purpose. What it is, whenever you supply an image, that will be evaluated by this image policy webhook. But thing is here, it will use internally webhook. So how it will work? It will parse the request and it will tells the API server that whether whatever the image you passed, whether it is a legitimate or not, whether it's allowed or not. Let's see how it works. First of all, you have a one deployment, say you specify docker.io, and I want to know how this image policy webhook works. First is, you will be applying kubectl apply and this deployment YAML, then it will go to the API server, then API server will pass through the authentication, then second is authorization, yes, both are successful, then it will trigger image policy webhook, which you will define. What this will do is, this image policy webhook will have a kubeconfig file. What is this kubeconfig file? This kubeconfig file will have its webhook specific access details. Means I want to validate Docker in my list, or whether I wanted to say I have whitelisted 50 this kind of image repositories. So somebody has to validate, right? That is somebody is a backend web service, webhook service. So who will connect this image policy webhook? How it will connect? By using this kubeconfig. So it will read the configuration, and then here this will have a all whitelisting logic. So once it will checks, then it will tell the API server, yes, whatever the docker.io you have supplied, yes, it's allowed. If it is denied, then it will give the deny. Then API server simply deny that this underlying registry is not allowed, something like. So this is how the image policy webhook will work. Now here we see three components. One is image policy webhook, second is KubeConfig, third one is the backend. So let's try to understand. First is a backend service. What is this backend service? It's a simple backend service. It's some name we given, and there is a image which will does the same thing. Basically here what is the whitelisting done here? Docker.io and gcr.io, both the registries are whitelisted, and this is exposed as a one of the Kubernetes service, simple service. It's a simple website kind of, but it will does the validation. Now second is a configuration file, kubeconfig. What is this kubeconfig? Whatever you created this backend service, that backend service specific configuration is here. My backend service is this guy, and my backend services requires HTTPS certificate, which is this certificate. And what is my API server is this one, and who is the user? This is the user. And what is the credential you are using to connect to API server? This one. So it's same like the regular kubeconfig file, but this kubeconfig is file for the API server to hit the backend service. Now the third one, where to store this particular configuration file to be stored in this location, or maybe you can create any under etc Kubernetes, under PKI, any you create etc Kubernetes, you can create any folder and place it, but better recommended to place is here. Next step is admission configuration file. So you will be creating a one JSON file. That JSON file will be pointing in this structure, will be pointing admission kubeconfig.yaml file. So if you go to the Kubernetes documentation, right, image policy webhook, you can see here this is the image policy file and admission configuration file here, and this is a kubeconfig file. So right, so you will be defining in this a JSON format. Then so here this kubeconfig file, so basically here admission configuration is pointing to kubeconfig, whereas your kubeconfig file will be pointing to the backend service, right? So it's a three-step process. So this will point to kubeconfig will point to backend. Right, now how to enable? So this is the most important, which is in the kube API server level. We need to add image policy webhook. That is the most important step. Second is admission control configuration file also need to be passed. So in order to work this image policy webhook, we need to add these two configurations in the API server level. This is a mandatory step. So it's a 4-step process. One, you will be creating this guy, then kubeconfig and backend service, then enabling it here. Then how to check that? Let me show you. Say clear kubectl get kubectl describe pod kube API. Yeah, this is the pod master pod. If you look at here, right, so basically enable admission plugins, enable admission plugin. So by default is a node restriction is added, so you need to add a comma and image policy webhook. Then another one is the admission control config file, which is not there here, so we need to add manually, right? So that's what, right? So kubectl get node. Next, image policy webhook. How to implement this image policy webhook? So first thing is you need to have one backend service as we seen in the previous. Second is you will be creating a configuration file. What this configuration? This is a kubeconfig file which is pointing to the first backend service, and another one is finally you will be creating a image policy webhook, that JSON admission configuration file. Then you will be enabling it a kube API server. So these are the 4 steps are mandatory, but this backend service for a demo point of view I will create, but usually you can create, you can host it anywhere else. Not only there is no compulsory to have this backend service in the Kubernetes cluster, but anywhere you can define, and if you are already have, you can just create a configuration file. That's a flexibility of image policy webhook, right? So now demo point of view, First we need to create a backend service, right? So for the documentation point of view, in the CKS preparation guide, under fifth section, secure your supply chain whitelist image registry. So the first step, basically here, backend service logic to whitelist. See here, this is the deployment and this is the service which has a logic to whitelist. What are the image registries? Yes, it has a, but in order to deploy these two, it require one secret. So in order to create this secret, this particular secret, you need to create a one particular certificate. To create that certificate, we need a CFSSL utility. Then after that, you need to create a certificate signing request and approve it, and approved certificate you need to place it into the directory. Then create that secret. That secret will be used here. Why we are doing this? Basically, when you create a kubeconfig file, right, you will be specifying the certificate which is created in this above step. Means this particular service will be accessed by the kubeconfig. KubeConfig means it's a kube API server as an admission controller. So let's look that. So now I'm in a 2-node Kubernetes cluster, right? I will SSH into the vagrant, SSH master, right? I'm going inside the master. So first what I need to do is, first I need to install this CFSSL, right? Now I'm inside the master node. So I will log in as a root node. So if you look at here, right, as a Kubernetes documentation, right? Kubernetes documentation, right? Here CFSSL, just you search it here, right? Manage TLS certificate. So basically here you can request a certificate by using this particular utility and you can approve this as well. So that's what I'm trying to do here, right? So basically here, copy these and then install the CFSSL utility. First I am doing, right? It's installing. Yes, it is installed now, right? So now clear. Next is we need to create a CSR, right? So what exactly we are doing here is, basically, if you look at here, there is a create a certificate signing request here, host mysvc.mynamespace.svc.cluster. But whereas here, what is mysvc? Image bouncer webhook. So if you control F right here, this is a deployment and this is a service name is this one. So I'm creating the, basically, this certificate signing request with the whatever the given information. So, and by the way, here in the master node, if you look at ls, there is a calico.yaml, right? Then if I'll copy here and just insert here, right? Now ls, it's created a cs server.csr.server key.pm, this one. Now second is I have to create a certificate signing request with whatever the server.csr is generated here, which is as like this example, right? But the name and namespace must be issued with respect to the name. So I create this, right? So now certificate signing request is created. How to validate that? I will open a duplicate tab, kubectl get CSR. Now, right, this CSR is created and which is a pending. Forget about the above two, right? Now what I will do is, this needs to be approved first, right? kubectl certificate approve, and then I will copy this and this is approved. Now it's approved. So now clear, kubectl get CSR. Now image, this one is approved and issued now. And what is the name is this one. So once it is approved, what we need to do is, whatever the approved certificate, we need to re-download, right? So here I will go back in a master node, clear ls, these two certificates. Now you see here, I get CSR and JSON path certificate content. I am decoding and seeing. Now if I do ls, right, certificate.crt is downloaded. This is the approved certificate, right? Now what I am doing is, here I am creating the etc pki under webhook. So if you look at here, right, ls. This directory has so many certificates, but I don't want to merge mine, so I will create a webhook folder. So what I am doing is it here, right, mkdir -p. Oops, sorry, it's duplicated. Right, now it's created. Now clear. How to check that? Here webhook is created. Now what I will do is I will copy the whatever the certificate which is created, this is server.crt, to the newly created folder, right here, copy right here. How to check that? ls and webhook, right, it's there in this folder. Now next is we need to create a secret, right? So I copy here, this is right. Now it's created the secret. How to check that? kubectl get secret, right? So it will show me the image bouncer secret. So now the secret is created. Now I can go and create this deployment, right? So what I will do is I will copy this deployment, right? I'll go to my main file vi. So I will open in a code.deployment.yaml. So it will open in a Visual Studio Code, so that I can paste this YAML file. So what I will do is here, basically here registry is whitelisted only 2 registries. So what I will do is here under the deployment, I don't want to whitelist gcr.io. I want to whitelist only docker.io, right? And this deployment YAML is created. Now ls, the deployment YAML is there. So now kubectl apply -f deployment YAML. Now this deployment and service is created. Now kubectl get spt, yes, service is there, and this is a node port. kubectl get deployment, yes, my deployment is running. kubectl get pod, yes, this pod is running, right? kubectl logs, right, and this is the pod which is a image bouncer. So this is running already, right? Echo. If you look at this one, we have done the so far first one, choose backend service which has a logic to whitelist, right? Perfect. Now next is we need to create a kubeconfig file pointing to the backend service. So let's go to the documentation here. Yeah. So before going to the basically kubeconfig file, so we need to add whatever the image bouncer domain name into the etc host, so that it will be resolved by the API server. So here I'll go to the API server, clear, perfect. Now cat etc host, right? Now it's added here, perfect. Now clear. Next thing is we need to create a kubeconfig file. So kubeconfig file, I will just simply copy this kubeconfig file, and this everything is correct, right? And what I need to do is I need to create the kubeconfig file where in the web directory, which is I created here. Let me show you. I'll do the ls, right, just now. Yeah, in this folder we need to create. So vi, this one, right, etc kubernetes pki webhook, under that admission-kubeconfig.yaml. Under that I will paste this one. Now I'll paste this, right? And only thing is we need to make sure this particular server.crt exists or not, and this is the our webhook URL. So kubectl get svc, right? This is a webhook URL, right? Perfect. Now sorry, perfect, right? So now let's double check once. Yes, perfect. This is done, kubeconfig. Now second, the kubeconfig is done, right? So let's double check the kubeconfig, right? So this is a server.crt. So let's double check cat, yes, certificate is exist, then perfect. And now clear. Next is we need to create a admission configuration JSON file. So this is basically third one. So kubeconfig file we created, which is pointing to this guy and this guy certificate as well. Create ImagePolicyWebhook admission configure, which is in the JSON format, no problem. So we will create. So now go here, vi, this is the admission configuration. So we will be creating under the pka folder, right? Perfect. Now I will copy this JSON content and then paste it. Make sure this path is correct, right? So and we will validate as well. So now cat this JSON file, and I'll copy this cat, copy this perfect, and this certificate authority cat. Now everything is perfect, and this URL is also perfect, right? Now everything is correct. So now these 3 steps are completed. 1 2 3 are completed. Now the most important step is we need to enable it at the API server level. So how to check that API server configuration? Here, if you look at here, documentation, this is the manifest of API server. So what I will do is I will go here, ls, this is a API server YAML. So what I will do is I will edit this particular YAML file, vi, and edit, and little bit careful. So we need to add enable admission plugins as the image webhook policy webhook. So here this is right. So here I have added a image policy webhook, and then second is admission control configuration file, which is a JSON file which we created, right? So here, right, so this is a, and make sure this path is correct, so we will validate as well, right? So now cat kubeAPI server, and then go here, then this is the admission configuration file JSON, and cat JSON, which is JSON file is correct, and this file is kubeconfig, cat this kubeconfig is correct. Now this server CRT also is correct, perfect. Now we are all good. Now we have modified the kubeAPI server, so we need to just reload the daemon. So system ctl daemon reload, right, system ctl, and the restart kubelet, better to kubelet, right? Now go here, kubectl get pod, yeah, it's running now, it's up, and kubectl get pod -a, right? Now my kubeAPI server just 16 seconds, very fast, right, just now. And how to check whether my kubectl describe pod and my master node, and which is in the kubeAPI namespace, kubesystem namespace, enable admission plugin, yes, image policy webhook is updated, and then its JSON file is also updated. So we are good to go, all 4 are completed, right? Now what is the next step is go to the documentation, right? Here we need to test now. So what I will do is I will copy this is a pod, which is currently what I did, basically I have whitelisted only docker.io but not gcr.io, right? So what I will do is I will try to create a pod by using, now I will come out of this master node, I will come to the airport node, vi some pod.yaml I will create, right? Here what I will do is I will paste this, right? And I don't want to use a docker, but whereas I will use the gcr.io Google container, and what I will do is instead of 1.27 I wanted to give a latest, right? So latest I wanted to give. So, and how to know the gcr.io busybox pod? Just go to the Google gcr busybox, and then it will take you to the gcr.io busybox pod, and here click on the busybox, and there will be a latest 1.27 and 1.24. so I wanted to use the latest one, right? So basically if you click here and pull command, and this is the command which I pasted here, right? Now cat pod.yaml. so this is the, oh sorry, it's a typo, I need to correct that, otherwise it will fail. Right, latest, right. Perfect. Now kubectl apply -f pod.yaml. Now see what happens. So there is an error by the image policy webhook saying that you cannot use a latest tag. Who is throwing this error? If you look at this particular webhook, it's using a canlight cube bouncer latest. This is the image. So this image is throwing that error because it has a designed for the such kind of purposes. Now what we will do is, this is a good indication that at least our working. So kubectl get pod, right? And this is our webhook, right? So what I will do is kubectl logs. See, these are the logs. What it is doing, rejected the image. What it is rejected, busybox latest. So it's showing me what's happening under the hood. Right? So far we have seen this. The next approach is OPA Gatekeeper implementation approach, as I have already created a video on that. Basically, first we will be installing a OPA Gatekeeper in the Kubernetes cluster, master node and worker nodes and everywhere. Then second is, you will be creating a constraint template. Then after that you will be creating a CRD, and then you will create a deployment, and then you will be testing. So this is another approach where you can do. So basically, if you look at the YAML and where you will be creating one constraint template, it will have some rego logic to basically whitelist or blacklist. So here you are checking if it is something satisfaction is good, then starting with some XYZ repo, then you will throw this kind of message. So, and then second is basically the CRD, where CRD you will be creating this kind of CRD where repos you will be specifying as a docker.io or whatever the repos. Then whenever you try to create a pod with a specific repos, then it will block other than docker.io. So this is another implementation where you can leverage OPA Gatekeeper functionality or else ImagePolicyWebhook. So depend on your use case, how you wanted to configure. If your ImagePolicyWebhook is residing outside of the cluster, means go for a ImagePolicyWebhook. If you wanted to specify this kind of mechanism, just keep the OPA Gatekeeper. So yeah, that's it for this particular demonstration point of view. If you like it, definitely let me know in your feedback as a comments. Thank you.